The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those knuckleheads of liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We're coming at you on December 5th, 2022. I tell you, about a little over about 2 years into the Biden administration, and boy, does it seem like a long slog. But we have an interesting departure from that today. We're going to talk about a film, and it's a documentary film that's coming out, and it's called The Innovation Race. And so that's going to talk a lot about trade and intellectual property and intellectual property theft. And so those are certainly issues that liberty-minded people are interested in. So we want to get into that. But before we do, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. And my upper right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And in our lower left-hand corner, we have our special guest today to talk about the film. He's actually even in the film too. And his name, he is retired Colonel John Mills. And among the many hats that he's worn professionally, he had been the director of cybersecurity policy, strategy, and international affairs at the Department of Defense. So he's got a little bit to say about this too. Innovation, it's sort of a key issue. How do we invent things? How do we decide who owns ideas around these? These are all complicated questions that certainly impact trade and the wealth of a nation. James, maybe you could pull up the website real quick so we can direct people where they can go to find out a little bit more. We're going to start a trailer. We usually don't do this on the show, but this will really help to set the stage because there's a lot going on here, and I think in 3 minutes they can say a lot more than I can about it. So let's pull up the trailer. James, can you pull the trailer?
For over a century, America has been the world's inventor, a country whose ideas and innovations transformed mankind. But today, our nation faces challenges at home and abroad. Challenges that threaten our economic and military security and the very idea of American greatness.
We have a great history of inventors in America who've done great things. The Wright brothers, Thomas Edison. We have a system that has encouraged people to be inventors, to solve problems by providing them with the ownership of what they actually created and patented.
How do we turn inventions into innovations? How do we turn an idea in an inventor's head or something in a lab or the garage into a real-world product or a real-world service that other people can use and enjoy? And that's the key of the patent system. That's what patents as property rights do.
A patent is a constitutionally created property right. It's something that our founders, our framers of our Constitution recognized.
Our patent system used to be very strong and reliable. That's no longer the case.
There's some big tech companies up here whispering in the ears of congressmen, sliding campaign donations to them and saying, we want you to dilute the patent system even more.
Patents haven't just played an important role in growing our economy. They played a key role in developing the technologies that have made our country safe.
Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party in the last 5 years have made it abundantly clear that they intend to not just compete with the United States, they intend to surpass us and to be the world leader in innovative technology.
Innovation drives economic security and national security. We've lost sight of what it is to protect this nation.
China's investing heavily in its own innovation, in its own military. They are serious competition for us. We need to up our game.
And they've gone, hang on a second, what if we don't just steal the technology? What if we steal the system that America actually operated successfully and we implement it in China, what if we out-America America? Dominating technology means you dominate the economy of the world. Dominate the economy of the world, you dominate the world itself. It all goes back to the question of who is going to develop the technologies of tomorrow. Clearly, this is a race that we cannot afford to lose because we're not going to have a country.
Okay. Well, no, that was certainly a good introduction to all of this, and it certainly shows what some of the stakes are, and certainly with some of the the tensions we've been having with China, how important some of this can be. So, John, did you want to tell us a little bit about how you got involved with this film?
Yeah, so Luke Livingston, the producer, had reached out to me, and I think he'd referenced that Steve Bannon had encouraged that I'd be one of the people in this film. But that's how I got involved. And curiously enough, and related to the previous segment on the book, I was in 2011, the foundation for this whole film is what happened in 2011 with the America Invents Act. Okay, and everybody, we need to learn never, ever, ever, ever trust a nice sounding title on a piece of legislation, because it's usually the opposite. And I was working on a parallel, because I knew the AIA was going on at that time, debate and structure of the American Invents Act, but I was working on a parallel piece of legislation related to cyber. And so I was more focused on the cyber legislation. I was one of the key drafters of that. But this went on. What happened with the American Invents Act is it essentially destroyed the existing American patent system. It created this internal board, which they call a court, but really does not operate under any form of normal legal procedures of evidence and ability to cross-examine, et cetera, et cetera. And it essentially, after a patent is awarded, it allows somebody to repeatedly question that and essentially strip away and minimize the totality of that patent, which begs the question, why even have a patent?
Well, and John, before we go too much farther on that, maybe we ought to get into the question too. Just what is intellectual property for the listeners? I mean, essentially, we're talking about patents and the idea that the government is giving the rights to somebody, to exclusive rights to make money off of that idea, essentially. So, sort of a monopoly on an idea, I guess you might say. And so, did you want to go any deeper on that, or is that?
It's foundational for those who believe in a constitutional republic. This was so important. This was in our original Constitution. Yeah. This is foundational to why America is different. In our Constitution, we actually recognize the value of intellectual property through the patent system. We actually recognize the patent system in our original Constitution. And so that's foundational, is encouraging innovation and protecting it once it's been established through a patent, so that those who work hard will be able to reap the benefits. But it's good for all of us. It helps all of us. And the 2011 piece of legislation did the exact opposite.
You know, John, we would not go too deep in the weeds here, but there's a very big disagreement on this show about intellectual property versus real property. Could you kind of let's illuminate us a little bit as to why intellectual property may be just as important as real property, or not? Could you just talk a little bit to that subject?
Well, sure. I mean, in my layman's perspective, I'm not a lawyer, but intellectual property is ideas that are foundational to goods and it could be even services too. And it is valuable, and it should be treated with respect as valuable. And so it is real, whether it's a patent, a copyright. We want to reward the hard work. So yeah, intellectual property is very real, and this is why the FBI and the DOJ do spend, in addition to spying on the president, they do spend a lot of time protecting intellectual property.
Yeah. Oh, and just for the reference too that John gave, he's the author of a book called "The Nation Will Follow," and it talks about sort of the deep state and some of the spying that they do. But you can actually find that on another show that we did interviewing John. So check that one out if you want to go deeper on that dive. But no, one of the conflicts we have on the show, when we talk about intellectual property, is just that there's a fundamental difference, I guess, with respect to economics and scarcity. The idea of before an idea is hatched, there's scarcity just like real property. But once an idea is hatched, then there's no scarcity of that idea. The idea that if everybody uses the idea at the same time, it doesn't keep somebody else from using the idea. So whereas like, with your house, obviously, or your shoes, you can't, everybody can't use those at the same time. They're scarce. So that's, it's sort of a little technical economic point that we've batted about a lot on the show. But anyways, yeah, we don't want to deflect too far.
We really do, because I have a lot to say about what you just said.
Yeah, we can go on for a whole hour kicking that around. We want to really stay focused on the nuts and bolts of this issue right here. But as far as 2011 goes, and it's called the American Invents Act, I guess it was called, you said. And so that essentially, I guess it weakened the patent laws then? Is that what it did? So it allowed...
Yeah, and we want this to be a bipartisan issue, and we want to garner, it's an educational process. So I don't want to just, beat up on the legislative branch of government, but this is where we saw Congressman Coons and we have a couple of other congressmen that are involved in this film. But this is the challenge of oftentimes legislators do not really understand what they're voting on. Why is that? They're busy. The legislation is complex and overly long. And oftentimes staffers, God bless them, we need staffers, but the reality is oftentimes you have more junior types of staffers that have not had a lot of life experiences, and they're explaining to a US rep or a senator in the elevator in 30 seconds what this thing is they're about to vote on. That's not a good process. And so you have a 21-year-old slurping a juice box explaining the complex legislation in an elevator. We just have to do better at that. And I apologize. It's somewhat funny, but oftentimes there's a significant element of truth in this, and we have to do better on this process because that's how we got this act. That's how we got. If congressional members really red teamed and went through this and really understood the implications of what they were acting or voting on, they probably would have put a pause to it. So we have to address this, and we're going to have to go back and substantial overhaul of this language, because what it's doing is it's driving innovators either A, why spend my time on a patent at all? Or B, let's go to China, because China now is essentially offering the patent system we used to offer. And then we shot full of holes in 2011.
One number I wanted to bring up too from the film, it says, just so people understand the scale of what we're talking about here. I can't remember what the source of the information is, but they said $600 billion is what they believe it costs this country annually, the theft of intellectual property to China. So, nowadays when they're just throwing around trillions, 600 billion is a lot of money still.
That's FBI Director Ray. Those are from some of the congressional testimony.
Okay.
But it raises a question. I mean, if we are talking about this level of loss to the United States, to our economy, and to probably to some of the people who came up with the ideas of some of this, some of the goods and services that we see here in our society. If this thing is so impactful upon us, why is nothing being done about it? I mean, it's the numbers are out there. We know about the theft that is ongoing. Why is nothing being done about it?
Yeah, because the democratic republic is the absolute worst form of government, except for everything else out there. It's slow and bureaucratic. But we should, and the legislators are so distracted with so many bells, whistles, sound, light, and heat that, this is an important one. This is foundational, and we've got to correct this. But, we have to break through the signal to noise ratio to get their attention. But this is this we need to always think long, and I've prepared dozens and dozens of pieces of legislation, or had to red team them, review them, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a bad one. They took a process that okay, maybe it wasn't perfect,
right,
but it actually was working pretty well. But and I remember this was the dance, and this relates to my book and the other things I was working on. This was a time when the marriage between big government and big tech had not taken place yet. They were still kind of dancing and weren't totally sure with each other. But this is essentially, in hindsight, was essentially the big gift from big government to big tech, because the primary beneficiaries of this new process is big tech, and who have deep pockets, armies of lawyers who can return and revisit an awarded patent that they look at as competition or a threat, and repeatedly bring it into this quote court inside of Patent and Trade Office, and just whittle it down until it's, the guy or girl says, well, why did I even spend time doing a patent? This is a
So that sort of brings us to, I guess, the point of how does this impact both people who have patents currently and people who are trying to get patents, these changes in the laws? Does it discourage people from trying to get a patent? And also too, for those people who are patent holders, does it water down the value of their current patents?
Yeah, and again, this was so important that the founders actually put it in the Constitution, the concept of a patent. So yeah, it's a deterrent to those who want to file, because they're watching what happened. There could be immense, people sell patents all the time. If you watch Shark Tank, it's one of the first things they ask on Shark Tank: do you have a patent? And a patent's oftentimes is part of the financial calculus and on discussions on buy and sell of companies. It's very important, but it's with what we've seen, and this is more in the kind of the cyber IT big tech world, but it has ramifications, because anybody can use this to whittle down a patent they see as a threat. This is the foundation of crony capitalism, which is not capitalism. Okay, if big government is choosing winners and losers, that is no longer capitalist. That is essentially, you curry favor with the government, do what you're told, they'll decide who wins and who gains and who gets shut down. That's no longer capitalism. It's crony capitalism, which is a variant of a rapid slide to socialism.
Oh, okay.
Or fascism.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely, Leon. Yeah. Okay, can you hear me?
Jason,
maybe are you guys hearing me fine? Because
you look like you were frozen for a second.
It looks like maybe I'm the one bogging down this time.
Yeah.
I might be getting frozen a little on this end, but things seem to be okay now. So, but I heard most of that. Okay, excellent. One of the things I wanted to bring up real quick too, and as we talk about, I guess, what it takes to even get a patent, James, maybe you could pull up the the visual on this real quick. So I found this article on IP Watchdog, and I think it's 2015 article, but it does have some figures in, and they talk about, just going in to get a patent can be a little bit daunting. I mean, it costs several $1,000s potentially to do a patent search, and and then of course there's fees to filing a patent as well. So I guess if you do have all of these impediments, then certainly you'd want to think that it's worth something after you get it,
Of course,
I
yes.
suppose. But on the other hand too, it may also be a little bit daunting as well for that person who's just trying to get their first patent, to see that there's all of this work just in trying to figure out, is this idea already taken? I guess as well. So so I guess it cuts both ways a little bit. And when we were talking about the $600 billion dollar figure, this other website called CopperPod Intellectual Property, they had a number here that said patent litigation costs between or excuse me, rather, courts have awarded about just under $5 billion in patent damages in 2020, rather. So, we're talking about $600 billion in theft, but maybe only $5 billion, that potentially recovered in that. You can see that there's a huge gap between, I guess, how much is taken and how much you're actually able to fight back in the courts on some of these things. So,
well, some of this thing is not even prosecutable, because if the theft is occurring in a foreign land, we have no jurisdiction there, none. So if China thieves stole some intellectual property from the United States, someone in China, we have no recourse, none whatsoever, because we have no jurisdiction there.
Yeah, and the Chinese model of taking down our different economic sectors is it continually, the method of entry is lowest price, even though it may be artificially low, which it is often artificially low. I always use the example of GoPro was the last U.S. maker of drones in America. They went belly up. They declared no mas in 2017. Because DJI had undercut them so much. Now DJI is under significant scrutiny on a number of fronts, but and there is a somewhat of a return of American manufacturers, but this is the game. And DJI, no question about it, had borrowed numerous technical features and capabilities, most likely unlawfully. This is the game. This is what's going on.
Yeah. I had a question, James. You could pull the visual at this point, but one of the points that the film makes is that China used to just outright steal a lot of the patent ideas and just go and manufacture them and then sell the products back to us and things like that. And then they said that eventually China developed its own patent system so that it would be a sort of a strong defense on intellectual property for themselves. But it does sort of beg the question, if everything was great before 2011, and if China was stealing everything before 2011, were the patent laws really doing a great job before 2011, or were there a lot of deficits there as well?
Well, I think there was, but I think in many ways we've turned the tide, and maybe 2 or 3 years ago on. Back then, everybody's view, and I live this because a lot of my work is everybody's view was China was the future. China was the future. And so I think a lot of it was we just accepted it. Well, it's just an acceptable loss, loss rate. It's, they're the future. So if they're ripping us off also, we're just going to eat the loss and move on. Well, the problem is, many sectors did not realize it until it was far too late, that this was a game that they were going to destroy these market sectors and take them over. I use the term evade, embrace, supplant for the three-step methodology for the Chinese. Evade our patent laws, then begin to understand them and adopt them, and by embracing, and then supplant, they just essentially take us over or essentially retire us, now they're offering a patent system. I don't know if there's any good stats on how many non-Chinese have successfully defended a patent in the Chinese court. That would be very interesting. I think the reality is there's probably very little track record or data on that. But yeah, this is what's going on, and I think it was a different outlook back then. I think even you have some that may be Biden supporters, but they realize that there is nefarious intent of China. Back then, everybody was kind of, yay, China.
Yeah. Well,
gosh, are we out of time, Jason? I just have
we're getting pretty short.
I'll pass. Okay.
Okay. Well, one of the things I was going to bring up real quick here in the end is certainly with China having this setup where they've stolen a lot of intellectual property in the past, and now they have this kind of setup where if you want to do business there, you got to share they have rules in their government where you have to give up your intellectual property to their companies in order so that they can essentially just compete against you, I guess, in the future. But what are the defense implications of that? Because you certainly have a background on that side of things.
Not trusted. It is effectively under the Chinese rules. You're effectively owned. If you're going to do your incorporation in China, means you are 51% owned by the government right off the bat. It means you must have full access and sharing with the intelligence services. So it just, bottom line, it can't be trusted. Period. You cannot trust if you've, as a price of entry into China, you have done all these things, that entity is just can't be trusted anymore.
But this has big national defense implications as well. So, certainly with, I guess, defense technology, even, I guess. So. Well,
and what we would experience, and I experienced this in government on a number of occasions, is people would say, "Oh, that's not us. We're umpty-ump U.S. Incorporated. That's umpty-ump China Incorporated. We have no connection with each other." And it's like, you got to be kidding me. And these are major firms, and major firms in the big tech world that would present that intellectual argument that may legally be correct, but is utterly silly. And there's no way to measure, test, gauge anything about that, just other than trust us. That's China Incorporated. We're U.S. Incorporated.
Okay. And James, we're just about out of time. James, can you bring up the visual real quick? So on the way out here, so we have the website, The Innovation Race. You can find out a little bit more about this issue there, and bringing up the website too for John's book as well. So you can find out a little bit more about that as well. And like I said before, you can check out a different episode that we did where we talked with John about his book. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. And until the next one, stay free.
Yes, indeed.